Hey Brad, how's it going?
I'm doing excellent. How you doing, Mark?
Oh, I'm good. We're down here in Cuckoo Town, where the Columbus Blue Jackets, New York Islanders, and Colorado Avalanche live. Whoop!
Let's go.
He shoots. He scores.
You're listening to The Neutral Zone with Brad and Mark. Coming at you from the land of the free.
Welcome all to episode number 7. We're deep into the first round of the playoffs here. It has been a roller coaster of a ride. Like Brad and I were saying before the beginning of the show, if anyone had told you where the playoffs would be at right now, would you believe them a month ago?
I doubt it. And if anybody had said, like you said, we were talking about it off the air, that if someone had told you that Tampa, Calgary, Pittsburgh, Nashville possibly looks like they might be gone, and Winnipeg were all going to be gone in the first round, I think everybody would have safely put their house up on a bet for that, that wouldn't have happened. But here we are. This very much could happen, right? Just depending on what happens to Nashville.
I agree. We said it before on our preview show before the playoffs. It's so cliche to say it, but anything can happen in the playoffs, right? And it sounds so stupid to say it, but it's true. That's what we've seen happen. And it's been really, really exciting to watch. If you are a fan of Calgary or the Jets or Tampa or Pittsburgh so far, and you've lost out, Brad, what can we give some key words of advice as to how we can help people cope?
I think that you just need to, it all depends on the team, right? If you're a team like Calgary or you're a team like Tampa, you have a really good team.
Let's reach out to those Calgary and Tampa Bay.
Yeah, and first time in NHL history that the two number one seeds, West and East, have both bounced in the first round. So that's, we're seeing an unreal, we were talking about it before the show too, it's been an unreal and weird season. We'll talk a little bit more about that here, of even from the halfway point of the season, how things have changed. In terms of advice, you could give to those fans, Tampa, Calgary, I think you got to stay the course. Right after the games, you're probably feeling like, we got to blow it up because what went wrong, maybe we're not a playoff team, that type of stuff. But I think both those teams have good cores. Have a window right now still of at least the next 3 to 4 to 5 years where they're still going to be elite teams. They're going to lose some guys, right? I think that's just inevitable in the cap era.
Well, I haven't had a chance to look over the cap troubles that Tampa Bay are going to be in next year, but they're up against the wall.
They'll be against. They got Braden Point they got to sign.
Yeah,
it'll be a tough sign. And they have the benefit of a couple team-friendly contracts for Kucherov and Stamkos in terms of what those guys are probably actually worth. And again, that plays back to what we talked about a few episodes ago, where they have that no state tax. So that helps them.
Yeah.
Calgary, they got to sign Matthew Tkachuk this offseason. And so, they're going to return probably unless they decide to make a big change, they're going to return a lot of the same team outside of some role player guys. Mike Smith, whether he's going to be back or not, we'll see. And he played stellar for them in the playoffs.
Well, I think when you look at Tampa Bay, you can say that there's nothing that Tampa Bay has to change. It's just that that horseshoe.
Yeah,
that they have to get a hold of next time.
And momentum is a big thing. And I think we talked about this last episode too. Again, another thing we've talked about in the past. I think you saw what letting off the gas at the end of the season can do. We know Tampa, they clinched so far in advance. They weren't in playoff mode. Calgary was very similar. I'm sure Calgary fans were kind of hoping that because they didn't clinch quite as early as Tampa, that wasn't the case. But they lost their last 2 games heading into the playoffs. They lost to the Ducks and to the Oilers, the second and third worst teams in the West, right? Mm-hmm. And granted, they were resting some guys for those games. However, it's tough. Like once you lose momentum, it's tough to get that momentum back, right? And Colorado and Columbus, they were fighting for their playoff lives right up until some of the last days of the regular season. So they were in that mode. They, and it's a lot easier to transition into it. And it's the way that it happened,
It's funny because, at the same token, I really didn't think that Colorado deserved to have that last playoff spot.
Nobody in the West did, though. That was the funny thing, right?
Yeah, I believe that there was other teams. I thought Chicago came on really strong and maybe deserved to slip in there a little bit. Arizona played lights out hockey down the stretch to really put themselves on a pedestal and give themselves a chance. And just some unfortunate events down the road, and they lost that momentum. They couldn't carry it for as long as some other teams have. And so, here we are today.
Here we are,
right?
In Colorado, and they're looking like whether they're as good of a team as they're playing right now, they've and it doesn't take much. It just takes a team to find that perfect zone for 2 months, right?
Yeah.
And has Colorado found that? And they could completely regress next season and go back to a mediocre team, having just found that like I said, that perfect game that's going to get them to the final. We'll see what happens. There's a lot to go through. Vegas is going to be a tough team to play against if they make it through San Jose. And we talked about this too. Another little issue we've talked about: some teams match up better against other teams. Just because Columbus has beaten Tampa and Colorado's beaten Calgary, they might not match up against their next round opponents as well. It's definitely, Colorado used their size against Calgary. I think that was one advantage they had. And they're not going to have that advantage when they face one of San Jose or Vegas, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's true. When you really break down Colorado, coming into the series, we had said that one of the things we believed the Colorado had to do to win was to play better on the power play. And they did. They really capitalized often on the power play.
As they went along,
Calgary,
they did,
right?
yeah. They did.
Nathan McKinnon was just an absolute beast out there for them. He had 8 points in 5 games. What else do you expect from him? Landeskog was right up there with points as well. And Rantanen, had 9 points in 5 games as well. That top line, they really carried them. But they also got a lot of secondary help in scoring as well, which is a must in the playoffs.
Oh, it's big, and that's what Calgary had going for them going into the playoffs, right? Their depth was amazing heading into the playoffs, and it just didn't pan out for them. And I guess before we go any further, I gotta eat my words, because I think I said if Tampa loses, that Calgary was going to go on to win the cup. That was before they lost Game 3, and things turned around completely on them. But I was wrong. They're not going to go on and win the cup either. So.
Just to say, from Calgary's point, though, is the one thing I think they can improve, and it's their goaltending. No?
I thought that Mike Smith was probably one of their best players in the series.
Okay. But let's talk about all season long.
Right. He was great in the last half of the season, so he kind of carried that through. And I think it's funny because he made a comment I think it was after that Game 3 loss in Colorado, that he said he's been in playoff mode for 2 months. So maybe that's why you saw him come in and play so well, because he was fighting to find his game again. He was battling for that last 2 months of the season, right. Whereas the rest of the team they were humming along throughout the season, right? So maybe that's why he played so well in the playoffs. He was battle ready. The rest of the team had kind of let off the gas a little bit, and they just couldn't find the momentum back. What do you think?
Well, would you not put a little bit of the fault on Mike Smith? And you can't put it all on them, but from what I saw a lot in Calgary, it was a lot of defensive lapses. Lots of breakdowns, leaving guys wide open, getting caught, watching the play instead of making focus on the puck or making sure they keep their defensive zones, blocking people out. They didn't do a lot of that. They allowed the Avalanche to get in on them.
They did, and I think they were far too passive. I think that was a big thing. Especially the penalty kill is obviously a key place where you see that, right? It seemed like they collapsed their box down, had a passive box, whereas Colorado, when Calgary was on the power play, they were in their face.
Yeah.
And I found, I think you've seen that evolution where the teams were in your face. And that's how Calgary was during the season. So it was a completely bizarre thing to watch. I don't know if it was a mental thing for them that they got in their own heads. It just seemed like they stopped playing their game, right? So it was a weird one. I mean, it's weird to see that happen, and it's weird to see the 2 number 1 seeds be out, So, I mean, for you, Mark, if you were the GM of, we can go through both those teams. If you were the GM of Tampa and you were the GM of Calgary, are you making any big changes in the offseason, or are you staying the course?
Well, okay, if I'm the GM of Tampa, I'm not changing anything.
Yeah.
I'm
Make sure you get your guys signed.
I'm trying to get my guys signed. I'm trying to keep points around. I see a couple key moves you can do. Maybe you can shed a contract like Tyler Johnson. There's some possibilities. Maybe move around a bit of your defense, but I wouldn't really want to touch too much of that. But other than that, no. And hey, by the way, Stevie Yzerman left, right?
Yeah.
So who's going to come in and really screw around with that? I think you could be that GM who comes back and sits back and just watches your team win the cup as well next year. Because I already think that Tampa Bay is one of the favorites for the cup again next year.
Oh, they have to be. And the only thing that I will say about their defense, though, is I think are they not? Do they not have 3 guys who are going to be FAs this year? So I mean, they're going to have to try to fit that. I'm pretty sure that guys like McDonough and like not Hedman or anything like that, but I'm pretty sure McDonough, I think, might be Strawman. They have a few guys who are FA, so I mean, it's going to be a tight fit for them with fitting Point in there and everything.
Yeah.
So they're not going to be bringing back the same roster. We know that it's the same for everybody. You'd never ever do.
Right.
So like I said, like you're saying, no, I agree. I don't think they make any big changes. I don't think they go out there and make a rash move and trade a key guy to try to maybe remake their team or anything like that. So how about Calgary? What do you think for them?
Well, I mean, for my stars, I think that I would want to add a bottom 6 defensive pair to come in. Someone a little on the veteran side as well. Not that Giordano's not a bad fit or saying that he's not a good enough leader, but I think bringing in some defensive help could shore up somebody, who you don't have to throw a whole lot of money at, a couple million, and he'll be a good stay-at-home defenseman. And on the other thing I would do is, I mean, Mike Smith is old. He's 37 years old right now. He was one of those late blooming goaltenders in the NHL. We didn't really recognize him or notice him until probably 26, 27 years old.
Yeah,
I think,
Arizona,
really.
because I didn't even realize he was in Tampa Bay before he was in Arizona. Like, that's how kind of out of the blue he came, right?
Yeah, he's a 37-year-old goalie who's only actually has like 13 years of experience in the NHL. But I still think that he shows signs of being old nonetheless.
He is, and he's always been one of those guys who depended on his athleticism, right?
There will be some good goaltenders out there to be had. I mean, if you look at the Islanders, who are carrying 2,
Leonard
prominent
and
goalies,
Grace.
Maybe there's a fit there for a trade with them. I think there's a bunch of goalies that will be on the market this year as well.
And the thing with Calgary and their goalie situation too, I mean, that's a weird situation because you got Mike Smith, and he was one of the reasons they were in that series. He played really well. He played really well in the last half of the season, but he played so terribly at the start of the year. And it's also a question of, does he want to come back? Because, he wasn't treated great by the fans in Calgary there at the start of the season, and rightfully so, because he played terribly. But it's got to be a two-way street, right? He's got to want to come back. And does a five-game series where the fans were on his side chanting Smitty, Smitty, Smitty. Does that change his perspective if he wants to come back? But then also on the Flames side, they have David Riddick, who was basically the reason that they got to where they got, because he played unreal throughout most of the season when Mike Smith wasn't playing great, right? But he also, like I said, you got to consider David Riddick's a younger guy, and they want to keep him. And they're going to have to sign Tkachuk. So, can you even fit a guy like Smith in there who's going to want probably $4.5 million as well?
Well, then what do you do for Riddick as well? You lose Smith. You think you have a good shot at becoming the number 1 goalie, but
there's no
Calgary
backup.
Calgary brings in somebody like Rice.
Yeah, it's a backup.
And now
1A,
Riddick's
1B.
saying, hey, I kind of thought I'd be your number 1 guy. Yeah. What are you doing here? And then you kind of got a bit of a turmoil thing there. You know, I don't know.
It'll be a weird situation. And the other thing, too, you're right 100% there. You hit it on the head because everything I heard out of Calgary this year was how tight-knit of a group they were. That they were, you know, they had, none of those guys had played on a team like they played on this year in Calgary because they were a tight-knit group. So if you start messing with that chemistry, what does that do as well, you know? The other school of thought that you saw come out of fans in Calgary and whatnot was trading one of the big guys like a Johnny Gaudreau or a Sean Monahan because of how outplayed they were, how much they got outplayed in the series. So do you do something like that, Mark?
Well,
if you're the gym in Calgary, do you make a big change like that?
Well, the other thing too is Mike Giordano back there, and I'm not saying to replace him now. He seemed to be playing excellent hockey now. And when you look at defensemen as well, I think they can play into their late 30s easily, 39, 40, as long as they stay relatively healthy through their career and that. I mean, Zdeno Chara, he is just a big body guy,
And
but he's still doing it.
He's a freak of nature too, right, in that sense.
Yeah, Ron Hainsey in Toronto, he's an older fella on the defense. I think he's around 39-ish or something like that, or I could be off.
For sure.
But he's doing it there as well for them. I mean, a veteran presence is always good to have. It's great to have around on that back end. That's really where I think it is the most important to set up that leadership, right?
I agree 100%. And the other thing too with Giordano is he's much like Mike Smith, right? He didn't start playing until later in his career. Like he went over to Russia. So he doesn't have maybe as much of the wear and tear on him as a regular 35-year-old defenseman who's played since they came out of junior. Because he went a little bit of a more circuitous route, or however you say that word. I know I'm saying that wrong, but so he maybe he has more miles. I mean, the guy is a fitness freak too. The other thing that Calgary is going for them on the back end is, to me, you look at that roster and they have guys like Rasmus Andersson, Juuso Välimäki, Noah Hannafin, and then they have Oliver Shillington. All guys who are under 22 years old, and at least three of those four have top four pedigree, top two pedigree even. For they're saying Välimäki and Anderson is probably going to be their top pairing of the future. So, and Anderson already played on the top pair this year.
Of the future, and let's make no mistake about it, I think defense is I think one of the hardest positions to groom, and it really takes time. You just don't see a defenseman step in and just dominate, right? I mean,
not very many of them.
Rasmus Dahlin really struggled in his first year.
Yeah, Ekblad has been...
And who thought... And if anybody really thought that Dahlin was going to come into Buffalo and run away with the points this year, I mean, it was a Buffalo fan.
Exactly.
Okay?
Exactly.
It's very hard to learn the position there in the NHL. It's so much different than from where you're coming from playing. A lot of bigger guys who have been playing in the league for 20 years, such on and so forth. But, just to get back to what you're saying, Välimäki and Anderson being good guys for the future, Hannafin as well, but they're still going to take some years. Where do you put a guy into a defensive core like this is tough.
And honestly, if it's me, just my opinion, I think that TJ Brody goes.
You think so?
I think they trade TJ Brody.
Yeah.
Because there's lots of times throughout the season where you watched Rasmus Anderson step up into that top pairing with Giordano, and Brody was, especially near the end of the year, where Brody just seemed to kind of fall off a cliff a little bit. So I think you have a guy that can step in. He's going to be Anderson will be 1 year more mature. I don't think they need Brody necessarily as much with the depth they have. So there's maybe some space where they find some cap room, because Brody's making, I think, about 3.78 or something like that.
Right.
And they're replacing naturally within. So
what about Sam Bennett? That's a guy who hasn't really panned out in Calgary too much.
And the weird thing was that he played well for them in the playoffs. It's like his game is built for the playoffs. So the weird thing is for Calgary and Tampa is I don't think you've seen two number one teams where they went in number one and they have so many question marks heading into the offseason. It's kind of a bizarre thing, right? So,
right.
So we beat that one to death a little bit.
It's such a sad story for Calgary. We were hoping for the best out of them, being Canadians and being Canadian fans.
You were hoping for it.
We're hoping for them, and now we got our last team standing. That's out in the East, in the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Let's talk about them a little bit. Yeah,
everybody's got to cheer for them. Well, I mean, today, as we're recording this, we just finished watching the Toronto Maple Leaf game before we sat down. And it was a very tough pill for Toronto fans to swallow, probably, hoping that they could close it out, thinking that that was their best chance. You know, the Leafs showed up in the first 10 minutes or so of the period, really seemed to have their legs underneath them, but then they kind of lost it and let Boston come back against them, skate all over them, not necessarily dominate the body so much, but really let them
Dictate the way the game was played. Yeah.
They lost control of the neutral zone. I'm speaking about Toronto here. There was too many giveaways there. The second period, they didn't show up at all. I know I've already heard it, and I was thinking it myself watching it, that this is the worst period I've ever seen Toronto play in the postseason. Playing like that for an entire period, you don't deserve to play. You don't deserve to win a hockey game. If they would have came back and won that game, it was because of Anderson. Anderson once again was huge for them tonight. He could have stopped the one goal. I thought that I believe it was DeBrusque had. I believe where it kind of went just above his shoulder, short side. It was very unfortunate for Leaf fans, but they get another chance at it Tuesday night.
That's you got to reset, right? And
the series has been going back and forth. So everybody, I think, maybe is pointing towards Toronto as being the favorites, but I don't know. Boston packs so much playoff experience, so much experience in general.
And that's a thing for them, yeah.
That it's very tough. It's going to be, with a team in Toronto that has as much talent as they do, they can beat them. But it's overcoming that grit that Boston knows they need to have. Toronto just needs to find that grit as well.
And maybe that's, when we're talking about this experience and in terms of Calgary and Tampa being in the same boat maybe as Toronto, where Tampa maybe not so much because they do have some experience, not with the exact core they have now. You look at Calgary, you look at Toronto, though, you look at Tampa to a certain extent, and these are teams that haven't learned how to lose yet, right? And people talk about that. That's an important lesson to learn. And I think for Calgary and Tampa, that's what it was. That they maybe didn't know quite what it took to win in the playoffs. They didn't realize that, and a combination of losing the momentum, and then now for Toronto, I think a part of it is that experience, and a part of it too is the mental aspect of getting over that. We talked about it before the playoffs started. That hurdle of not ever beating Boston in the playoffs.
Yeah,
it's just a lot of these things. These teams are so close that a lot of it is mental, right? A lot of it is who has that mental edge, who has the experience edge, things like that.
Totally.
And it's all timing. Columbus obviously came in at the right time and we're hot. Colorado, same thing. It's been an unreal playoff. So anything can happen, and we're rooting for Toronto. I think
absolutely.
I think the team I'd be more concerned with if I was a fan would be Winnipeg. Because, they've gotten that experience. They've been through the playoffs a little bit. They've lost, and they still can't seem to get over that hump, right?
Yeah.
So what's going wrong there? And we'll talk about them here in a second. We can finish off talking about Toronto-Boston. So who do you think is going to win that Game 7? What do you heart, head? What are you thinking?
Well, it's not just because I'm a Canadian fan, but I think if there's a game that Toronto's going to win now, you've had a taste of it again this year where you've had a chance to win and you lost. You kind of had that taste last year, but you only got one game to try to do it, and you lost. So this year, you had a chance to move on, and you lost. Now you got a redemption. You get
one more
second crack, which I think is huge for the Leafs to have had a chance to do. But I think that with the second chance, they can, look back at some of that tape, learn a thing or two, which they've been able to do this whole series as it's gone back and forth from one team to the next. No teams won 2 in a row. So I think that, Toronto can do it. Boston brings a lot of experience. It's tough. I think that it's such a dead even race. I'm going to give Toronto the hair of an advantage just because I do think that team has more talent on it than Boston does. But if Boston wins, it's because it's just of their experience.
It's experience, for
the
sure.
only way Boston wins that game is if they control the neutral zone. If they allow Toronto to stretch their passes and move it down the ice with ease, then Toronto wins it. And I think they've kind of figured that out a little bit, but they continue to let Toronto have it. So I think that's what will be the key for Boston. What do you think?
Should be an interesting game. You know what? I'm not even going to go on a limb and pick because
Come on, you made me pick.
All my picks have been wrong, but I mean, I'll go with Toronto too as a Canadian
you know what?
fan.
No.
I'll go.
Maybe you shouldn't. You're going to jinx it.
Yeah. Maybe I won't pick. Right? But
you already said
it. It's one of those interesting series, and you know, I think whoever moves on from this series has a pretty good chance, but you still got to get through Washington. You know, if we're going to pick,
well, the winner of this one will go on to face Columbus,
right? And then I think that the winner of this one should be able to get through Columbus. It'll be tough because Columbus. I mean, don't sleep on Columbus. Obviously, they took out Tampa. Like I said, though, I just think that was a perfect storm. I think a lot of these first round matchups are a perfect storm. You know, the other team too that if you were a fan of and you'd be concerned of losing would be Pittsburgh too, because you're looking at a team there that's coming out of their window and they can't seem to win anymore, right? So that'll be an interesting team to watch. And we won't talk too much about that, but that'll be an interesting team to watch in the offseason. Is do they do a big move? Like, is Kessel gone?
Oh, I think so.
I think he is. So that'll be an interesting team.
They need defense and no better guy to let go. Well, I mean, no better guy. He was awesome for them in the playoffs as is the regular season again.
For sure.
And he's an aging talent, but still nonetheless, I think he's still only 31. But I think he could get a premium defensive piece back.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know,
and you could look for somebody, I'm just going to point this out, but I think somebody like Nashville can use somebody like Phil Kessel right now.
Yeah.
They need second line scoring.
So if going back to Toronto, we can close Toronto and Boston out here with this question. If Toronto loses tomorrow, do you think Toronto makes any big changes heading into? I mean, they're going to have to sign Marner, right? They're going to have to. The Matthews deal's coming into effect, like a guy like Patty Marleau.
Oh well, I think there's all kinds of things that are going to happen there. I don't know how anybody else feels, but I mean, I definitely think that Patrick Marleau brings that veteran presence to the bench and the locker room and helps the guys prepare for games. I think his contract's up, and if he wants to stay, he's going to have to take a real big discount, I think, and take a fourth line role.
Yeah, I agree.
don't believe that he deserves to be on even the third line right now. He's been a total ghost in that series.
He may retire, right?
He may retire.
That might be and the thing I'll say too about the veteran presence, I agree. I mean, I agree that that's an important thing. Experience is an important thing, obviously. However, is those two things aren't necessarily mutually exclusive of being a veteran presence and having experience. Like, there's a lot of young guys who have playoff experience, right? Because it's a younger league. And really think about it. The teams that are winning, Columbus, Colorado, those types of teams, they don't have a huge veteran presence.
It's true.
I mean, you talk about Colorado, I guess Ian Cole would be the veteran presence there because he's won 2 cups with Pittsburgh. I didn't even think of him as a veteran. You wouldn't, right?
Yeah.
So you don't think of him as that traditional veteran presence that you think is necessary to win.
Yeah.
And those teams seem to be the ones that are winning. You know, you look at Calgary, they had veteran presence in Giordano and Smith. You look at Tampa, they had veteran presence in Stamkos and a couple other guys. And that didn't seem to really help them.
Yeah, Hedman and what's his other face back there? They're all good. They're all great to have out there. But I think you have a tough time cutting the tie.
Yeah, it's becoming a young guy's game, though. That's the thing, right?
Because you want to keep those guys around.
Yeah.
Because some teams do need it. I mean, let's not get into a whole topic about this, but like a team like
it's a topic
Edmonton
for the
Oilers,
offseason, yeah.
Edmonton Oilers could have used a great veteran presence, but
well, they had one. He's getting paid $6 million and only scoring 5 goals in the season.
Right,
so
yeah.
We won't go there. That's a whole, like I said, it's a whole off-season topic.
What about the poor Jets over there in the West Coast who had to, swallow a tough pill this year?
And they've traded their first-round pick again, second year in a row for a rental,
which is good for them. I like the way they do that. By the way, I love that they wait until the final minute and they make sure that they are in a position. I bet you if Winnipeg was in the lower bowl of that conference, that they wouldn't have moved their first pick, and they would have held on.
Definitely not. And the problem there is this, Mark, though, that you saw Pittsburgh do this similar thing, and they won a couple cups because of it. And what happens there is when you trade your first round picks, and like we talked about in the salary cap area, you're going to lose guys because you have your core superstar players, and then your depth players we talked about like an Andrew Kopp, Perreault, those types of guys. They play well enough that they kind of almost price themselves out of town.
Right.
Well, you got to have some good first rounders on entry level contracts coming in as you go along. So eventually, trading your first every year is going to catch up to you because your depth is going to go the way of the dodo bird in essence.
That's
so
true.
That could definitely hurt them in the future, right?
And we obviously see why that they do this. They feel that their window is there
exactly.
now.
So then when they lose,
they have to pay Patrick Laine and all these other guys, Kyle Connor. They have a lot of budding stars on their team as well that are going to need money, and they are tight on cap.
Yeah, so when you go in all in for a cup and then you don't get it, that's painful. Whereas the teams like Toronto, like Calgary, like Tampa, yes, they're going to have cap crunches. However, they're not in that place quite yet. They're a couple years behind Winnipeg, I would say. Winnipeg's been kind of at the top, and they haven't traded their first. I mean, Calgary has a couple of years ago. However, they've started to keep their picks a little bit more, and they're starting to restock the cupboards again, right?
Right.
So that's the big concern for me.
Is out of Winnipeg, is Jakub Trouba, is he going to be a free agent this year? Is he not?
I don't know. Did he only sign a 1-year deal? We have to really look. He might be on his way out, regardless of whether he's a free agent or not.
Yeah. What about Byfuglien? Is he still safe? Like, I know he had a really good playoff experience in that, but once again,
injuries. Is he becoming injury prone? I mean, that's a guy who has a lot of miles on his odometer. He played a long cup run in Chicago. He plays a rough and tumble style. So I don't know. I don't know if he's safe in Winnipeg. It's hard to say. They're going to have to make some tough choices. Kevin Hayes isn't coming back.
Well, okay. Yeah. No, I don't think so. Although you never know. You might be able to get him for some... Nah, he's back. He's gone.
I think he's gone. I don't think you can afford to.
I think they have bigger fish to fry here.
If you didn't keep Stastny last year, you're not keeping Kevin Hayes this year.
Yeah.
If you're Winnipeg. That's kind of my take on it.
True.
So.
I think if Trouba's gone, the Byfuglien sticks around. Right?
Yeah, it could be. That's, a good... I mean, they do need that.
You can't
that big
lose
defenseman.
two of your top four guys.
Definitely not.
In a season there.
And bigger guys, right? So
right. You never know. They might be able to...
Yeah, the other question you and I had kind of talked about off the air, and we don't have to get too much into it, but just kind of maybe a yes or no answer or whatnot. With Winnipeg, Calgary, at the trade deadline, they were both rumored to be hot and heavy in on Mark Stone. Does that come back and prove to be the move that one of those teams should have made? Would it have changed their fate in the playoffs?
Well, wouldn't it be interesting to be a fly on the wall of one of those rooms that happen to be making those phone calls back and forth to find out exactly what the pieces were that they need to give up? There was lots of rumors about what was going to be given up out of both teams. Obviously, first-round picks on the line. There was some potential. They really looked to seem to kind of want some budding prospects to be given their way, right? I don't think that... Vegas gave a whole lot up.
It was the defenseman. They gave up that I can't remember what his name was, but he was supposed to be the top defensive prospect. So I think for Calgary, the equivalent would have been Valimaki, and for Winnipeg it would have been Niku, which are both guys I don't think either of those teams wanted to give up. So I get why they didn't make the trades. However, when you look at your window and how both those teams had legitimate shots this year, do you look back a little bit with a little tinge of saying, maybe we should have. Maybe we should have given up that guy like Vegas was willing to do. It's a tough call, right?
What if it was sitting there? What if Calgary and Winnipeg both said, you know what? Yeah, we will do it, right? And then Vegas was sitting there, Senators were sitting there and saying, man, like both Winnipeg, Calgary, and Vegas have all said yes to our offers. It's kind of, we're just going to pick which one we think's the best.
Yeah, that's definitely not the narrative that was out there.
Maybe.
But we don't mean, just because that's not the narrative that was out there. Yeah, exactly. You're right. It doesn't mean that it was the way that it was. So,
because I definitely think that guys like that every year it seems like a big name off of a team that's doing bad is thrown up front. and everybody talks and it goes crazy, but you're never sure exactly how serious the team is in it. But every team seems to kind of reach out and ask, and whether the price is too much to pay or whatever, it is what it is.
Yeah.
But to me, guys like Mark Stone, obviously I think the Vegas has been a huge difference maker for them in this series. Without
Definitely.
Mark Stone,
I think they're done already.
Vegas is
almost.
in this series.
So it should be interesting. I think, before the playoffs started, there's no way you could have convinced me that it was going to be a rematch this year of Washington and Vegas in the finals. Now, as much as I want to see Toronto get there, and I hope that they do, it's a lot better chance, I think, this year of seeing another rematch of Washington Vegas with the teams that have moved on. So Vegas definitely. I mean, bringing Mark Stone in was a huge move for him, and they've got him signed for long term. So they're going to have to make some moves too coming up. I mean, they're going to be in a cap crunch. They're going to lose some guys. However, that top line of Pacioretty, Stastny, and Stone for the next several years, that's scary. With Smith, Carlson, and Marshall on the second line, or 1A, 1B.
Yeah,
they're dangerous.
It would just to talk about that Jets series a little more too, because the last game had to have been a bit painful for the Jets fans to witness, as Paul Maurice used his challenge early on in this game. In fact, it was 13 seconds in that he had to use it, and I think he made the right call with using it, because it was kind of close. It had the same feel as the Toronto challenge had the night before, so it could have been either way, but it didn't go their way. Then in the second period, there was an obvious goaltender interference.
I don't know how the NHL and the referees missed that one.
Yeah,
that was brutal. And
the ref, you could see, was also standing right behind the net as well.
And we talked about this in the last episode, the refereeing and how inconsistent and bad it's been. I don't know what you got to do about that, because it was almost like he was holding hands, like that. I think it was Maroon that was in front, and it's almost like he was holding Hellebuck's hand with he had his glove there, and he couldn't get reset. And with some of the calls I've seen goalie interference this year, that was a no-brainer. And it cost him the series. It cost him that game, possibly cost him the series, right?
And it's so funny, like, as fans that we watch these games so much, we watch so much hockey, you think that we'd finally be able to call a goal ourselves sitting at home, whether it's goal or no goal. And we seem to get it wrong.
Seems like a
more
toss-up.
often
It seems like a toss-up.
sitting around the house. But is there any thought about the NHL bringing another stipulation in to help protect that? I know they don't want to get games tied up and lengthy with reviews and that, but do you maybe make it more of a habit to try to review certain things like goaltender interference or stuff like that?
I think that they already do it in the last 2 minutes of every period or something, do they not? Where they automatically review at the end of the game. Yeah, they automatically review. So I don't see why they can't do it. Because there is a little bit of time for players to get reset.
Right.
I don't see why that. There's the replays that are going on for TV time. It's usually about a minute and a half before the game gets started again in some cases. So I don't think taking the time for, the players to have a quick rest, get reset for the next play, I don't think that there's any problem with them doing that. That's just me, though. So I agree. I think that they should be automatically reviewing every goal almost if it's close like that, just looking at it.
A little bit, kind of like the NFL does. They review every scoring play. If you it doesn't have to, you take 10, 15 seconds. If people are watching Toronto, you can get a thumbs up pretty quick from them if it was blatantly, good goal.
Exactly.
Right? And then on they move.
Exactly.
I don't see the harm in it. I don't want games to end because of unfair bounces or unfair plays or missed calls like that,
And actually, in my opinion, Mark, the other way to play it too is if you're watching a game and a goal possibly goes in. We've seen this happen before where they've played like 30 seconds to a minute more of the game, and all of a sudden you hear the stadium horn go off, and it's the situation room calling back and saying calling down and saying that goal actually went in. They stop the play, they reset it back to that exact time, and they replay that time.
Right.
I would have no problem with them having that happen when there's a goal like that happen and the play starts. Let's say they don't want to slow the game down, so the situation room in Toronto can review that play while the play even resumes and starts. And if they determine that that was goalie interference within, let's say, a 2-minute window after the play has started, then they go back and they blow the horn, and then they go back and play. They call a goal and they go back and replay that time. I don't know. Maybe that's a drastic measure.
I think you're on to something. It's a very vague, thought, but it is very good.
Something to definitely talk about in the offseason, I think. So.
I believe the only other series still going on that we didn't really touch on too much is the Dallas and Nashville one. And we also have Vegas. Well, Vegas and Sharks are going at it tonight. Game 6. Who's going to win that one, Brad?
I would say Vegas.
Vegas? I think Vegas
so.
is going to close it out tonight, too. I think they've been much more dominant of a team. Although the last game definitely didn't look like it, but I think
agree.
Vegas bounces back and they win it tonight, right?
I think they just have too much steam, too much momentum, and I mean it's just a matter of Fleury playing the way he can play. So yeah, I agree. And then in terms of Dallas and Nashville, what do you think? Who do you think's winning that one?
I still think Dallas has got it, man.
I agree. I think the Bishop.
I definitely think the Bishop is the better goaltender in this series, and he's going to pull it out in Game 6.
And yeah, before we end off here, the other thing we didn't really touch on, and we kind of talked about how bizarre of a playoffs it's been. We talked about how if someone at the beginning of the playoffs had told you the teams who have lost would all be gone out of the first round.
Yeah.
But if someone had told you too at the halfway point of the season, with where St. Louis was and where Dallas was, that they would be two of the teams that would be moving on from the upsets, no one would have believed that.
No.
St. Louis had everybody on the block at one point in the season. Dallas had their CEO or something like that?
Yeah.
Basically ripping their star players in the media.
Yeah.
So
and then Dallas was a write-off for the year because of that.
Unreal that those two teams have come back and are at the point that they're at, right?
Totally forgot about all that controversy too.
So it's been a wacky season in terms of we've seen a team tie the NHL record for wins, then lose in the first round. We saw the other number one seed in the West lose in the first round. We've seen all the upsets you could possibly want to see if you were a fan of upsets, and two of those upsets being teams that didn't look like they were even going to be sniffing the playoffs.
So yeah, I think if Dallas wins in Game 6 or Game 7, if they win the series, that's an upset
for sure.
That nobody saw
over Nashville
coming.
For sure.
Yeah, and another one that's not finished yet either was Washington and Carolina. Are we going to see any kind of resurgence out of Carolina?
At the beginning of the playoffs, I thought they could do it, but after losing 6-0 last night, I think that they might be done mentally too. But we'll see though; they could come out and surprise. I just think that again, that experience that Washington has being the defending champs, I just think that they're going to be able to pull it off. It's been a rough series too, right?
I think Carolina loves home. And they're going back there, and
that's very true.
They love playing there, and their fans are going to be crazy, and they're going to win that.
And then
it's going to go to a Game 7, which I think is eventually going to go to Washington.
I would agree. Yeah. So
if you put them in a Game 7 at home, I just don't think there's anything that could stop them.
So who are you picking to be in the finals now?
Well, out of the West, I'm picking Vegas.
Me too. I'll say Vegas.
Even though they haven't won their series yet, but I assume if they do win it, and then I really still think
I see Vegas coming out of there, yeah.
And I love the year of the upsets, so I think that out of the East, it's going to be the New York Islanders.
You think so?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go with the Caps. I'm going to go with the like I talked about before, the old repeat of last year. So that's what I'm going with. I could see New York doing it though. You could very well be right, so we'll see.
Braden Holtby and the defense of the Capitals are known to kind of cough every once in a while. And we really didn't see much of that out of that in New York Islanders.
They were solid,
against
Pittsburgh. That's for sure.
Boychuk, Johnny Boychuk's out for 3 to 4 weeks, I think, like that.
Yeah,
something like that. So I think that's going to hurt him a little bit in the next round. But I still think that New York's going to pull it off.
Right, so New York and Vegas in the finals, eh? And I'll say Vegas and Washington for a repeat, number 2.
And heck, you never know with the way Dallas and Colorado played. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if let's just put Columbus and Colorado in the finals.
That's what it's going to be, folks, as we're calling it.
There it is. You heard it here first.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it for us, folks, today. I hope you really enjoyed the show. We'll come back at you again in another week, and we'll keep talking about the tremendous playoffs we've had here. you can follow along for us on Twitter. Our Twitter handle there is the NutraZone CDN. We post our podcasts on there, so if you want to follow along to us. You can also just subscribe on iTunes or Google Play, and it'll automatically download to your device every time we release one. And you can also follow us along on Facebook at the NutraZone as well.
And give us any feedback you want. If you have any topics you want us to discuss heading into the off season, let us know and we'll tackle them.
Absolutely. We'd love to hear from you guys as our fans, and keep up to date and keep answering the questions that maybe you guys have. Thanks a lot for listening, and have a happy Easter. Enjoy the rest of the week, folks.
Keep your stick on the ice.
Adios. Peace.